I'd been running contract loads for linen transport out of Anchorage since the previous October. 5 months off keeping, my head down and my logbook clean. The work was good enough, steady. I hauled whatever they told me to haul. And most of the time, that meant drilling equipment, prefab modules, pallets off grasseries, headed to camps up on the slope. Nothing exotic, the kind of freight that showed up on Manifest Excelly, the way it looked in real life. That suited me fine. I'm not the kind F guy who goes looking for stories. I'd done enough driving in the lower 48 to know that the runs where everything matches the paperwork are the ones that let you sleep at night. Alaska paid better, and the routes were longer, but the principle was the same. You show up on time, you strap it down, right? You don't ask questions that aren't about weight or dimensions or delivery windows. You get paid. You move on. Linden didn't care much about my previous gigs, as long as my CDL was current and I could handle winter roads. I appreciated that. They ran a tight dispatch operation out of a low prefab building off Old Seward Highway. Schedules and coffee that tasted like it had been on the burner since morning, even when you poured eat at noon. Raven Knapp ran the board most days. She had a voice that came through the phone, flat and direct. No small talk, just origins and destinations. And diddlings, I'd met her in person exactly twice. Both times she'd been wearing the same rectangular glasses and the same expression that said she had 12 other problems, more urgent than me. I liked it. 2. Clean boundaries. Most of my February runs had been Anchorage to Fairbanks, Fairbanks to Prudhoe, back down emptier, with a return load of pipe that needed inspecting south. Routine stuff, cold, but routine. I'd gotten used to the light coming back in thin slices. The highway's empty, except for other commercial traffic, and the occasional tourists who'd miscalculated their vacation timing. The truck was a Freightliner, Cascadia, with her, decent sleeper, and heat. That worked. I kept the cab the way I kept my logbook. No clutter, no distractions. So when Raven called me on the 23rd and pulled me off the schedule I'd been running for 3 weeks, I noticed. I've got a rush pickup, she said. No greeting. Headed north to Dead Horse, then back south to Gakona. You available? I was parked outside a diner in Wasilla, finishing a mediocre burger and going over my fuel receipts. When tomorrow morning? Early. How early? 5. You'll stage out of the yard here. Head up to Dalton, loads waiting at a ConocoPhillips facility outside Pro. You pick it up, turn around, and bring it down to a site near Gakona. I did the math in my head. Anchorage to Dead Horse was something like 800 meters. If you went straight up, most of it on the haul road, rough in winter, even when conditions were good. Then back down and east toward Gakona, which sat inland past the Medusa Valley. That was another full day of driving. Maybe more, depending on weather. That's a long turnaround for a rush. What's that freight? Equipment? Single pallet? Secured load? Details at pickup, that was vague. But vague wasn't unusual in this line of work, especially when the client was oil and gas. They didn't like specifics floating around. Wait, under 1,000 pounds? It'll ride easy. Pay. She paused half a second. 6,500 flat. Half up front, half on delivery conversion. I stopped chewing. 6,500 for a 2-day run was nearly double my normal rate, maybe more. I wiped my mouth with a paper napkin and set down what was left of the burger. That's high. It's a priority load for who? Clients, private. You want it or not? I wanted it. That kind of money would cover my rent for 2 months and then some. But the fact that she wasn't naming the client and wasn't explaining me the timeline made my gut pull a little, not hard, just enough to notice. What's the delivery window? Pick up tomorrow. Delivery by the 26th. End of day. 3 days. Tight, but doable. F-road stayed clear and I didn't hit a closure on the Dalton. I'd done worse. Hazmat? No. Oversize? No. Freed. You'll have documentation at the yard. I figured it was some kind of repair part. Something that had failed at a research site and needed replacing fast enough that someone was willing to pay. Rush freight to skip air transport. Happens more than you'd think. Equipment breaks in the cold and sometimes it's cheaper or faster to truck it than to curtain it, a charter flight into a remote strip. Same day money. First half hits your account tonight. Second half within 6 hours of confirmed delivery. That was faster than Linden usually moved on payables. I didn't love the gaps in what she wasn't saying, but also didn't have a concrete reason to turn it down. The load wasn't hazmat, wasn't oversized, and the route was nothing I hadn't driven before. The pay was good, really good, and Raven wasn't the type to waste time selling me on something if it wasn't legitimate work. Yeah, I said, I'll take it. Good. Stage at the yard. By 0500. I'll have paperwork ready. She hung up before I could ask anything else. I sat there for a minute looking at my phone. The diner had a jukebox in the corner playing something counter, and the guy to booze over was working on a stack of pancakes that looked like it could stop traffic. I pocketed the phone and went back to my burger, but it tasted a little like cardboard now. Probably it had the whole time. 6,500 was a lot. It's been bought. I'd learned a long time ago that asking too many questions when the money was good, mostly, just got you pulled off the job and replaced with someone who'd keep their mouth shut. If the load was legitimate, and I had no reason to think it wasn't, then the pay was just a reflection of urgency and inconvenience. Rush fees, winter surcharge, remote delivery. It added up. I finished eating and drove back to my apartment. In East Anchorage, 1 bedroom, decent heat, a parking spot fit the truck. I kept my go bag packed and my cold weather gear staged by the door, so prep didn't take long. I set an alarm for 3:30 and went to bed. Didn't sleep great. That's normal. Before a long haul, my brain likes to run through checklists and contingencies when it should be shutting down. I kept thinking about the route, about Chinaral, time at Proter, about whether the Otagon Pass would be clear or if I'd hit wind. Eventually, I got a few hours. The alarm went off in the dark. I made coffee, showered, dressed in layers, thermal base, flannel shirt, insulated car, heart bibs, wool socks, eye packet extra gloves, and a spare headlamp. My phone showed 2 new notifications. A payment confirmation from Linden for $3,250 and a text from Raven with the yard address and a gate code. I grabbed my gear and headed out. The Linden yard was quiet at 5 o'clock in the morning. Just a few overhead lights throwing long shadows across the gravel lot. A couple of trucks idling near the fuel island and the dispatch building glowing pale yellow. Through its front windows, I parked and walked in. Ravi was at her desk with a headset on and a coffee mug that said World's Okayest Dispatcha. She saw me, held up one finger, finished whatever conversation she was having, then pulled the headset off. Bell, she said. Morning Cheslid, a folder across the desk. Bill of lighting, route sheet, delivery contact. Load staged at Kiko Phillips. Yard 7, about 12 miles west of Dead Horse off Spot Road. Security contact is Jasper Green. He'll meet you at the gate. I opened Ed's folder. The bill of lighting listed the freight as scientific equipment, environmental monitoring, and gate. A weight of 840 pounds. Dimensions were standard pallet. No hazmat. The delivery address was listed as Harp Research Station, Jacona, A.K. Witza. Contact number and a name I didn't recognize. Harp's still active for some projects. Don't know the details. I'd heard of Harp. Most people in Alaska had it was that big antenna array the government built back in the 9 South Toe study, the ionosphere or auroras or something. I remembered Reddings that they'd shut it down and handed it off to the University of Alaska a few years back. Guess they were still running experiments. This go straight to the facility or to a staging point? Straight to the site. Contact names on the sheet. They'll be expecting you. I scanned the rest of paperwork. Everything looked normal. Standard liability waiver. Cold chain Otis. Signature blocks. Cold chain. Loads temperature sensitive. It's climate controlled in storage. Once it's on your truck, don't leave it sitting in extreme temp for more than 2 hours without checking it. That was a little unusual, but not unheard of. Some electronics didn't like deep cold. Monitored. No external tracker, just visual. Check. You'll see what I mean at pickup. I nodded and signed the waiver. She countersigned, tore off my copy, and handed it back. Jasper's expecting you around 1,600. Don't be late, won't be. And Belle? She looked at me over her glasses. This one's need to know. Clients wants it quiet. No photos, no posting, no talking about the cargo. You pick it up, you deliver it, you cash the check. Clear, clear. I walked back out to the truck. The sky was still full dark. Stars hard and bright overhead. I climbed into Thocab, fired up the engine, let it warm while I programmed the GPS, and rechecked my fuel. Then I rolled out Tonto, the old sewer, and pointed north. The drive to Dead Horse was long and cold and exactly what I expected. I hit Fairbanks around noon, refueled, grabbed a sandwich, kept moving. The Dalton Highway was empty except for a couple of southbound oil trucks and one RV that had no business being up there in February. The road was compact, snow and ice, most of the way ridable but not fast. I kept it steady, watched for caribou, and made decent time. I rolled a Dino, the Prudhoe Industrial Zone, a little before 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The light was already going gray. Everything up there is gravel pads and modular buildings and steel pipe. All of it low and functional and painted in shades off-white, and beigette blend into the snow. I followed Spine Road West a couple of active drill sites until I saw the chain-link fence and the lit guardhouse that marked yard 7. I pulled up Tothgate. A guy in a black parka and a Kiko Phillips badge stepped out of the guardhouse. Not someone I'd seen before. Older, maybe 50-some, with close-cropped gray hair and a face that didn't look interested in small talk. It rolled down the window. Cold air poured in. "Mark Bell," I said. "Linden Transport. I'm here for a pickup." He looked at me for a second, then down at a clipboard. "You're expected. I'm Jasper Green. Follow me in. Stay in your vehicle until I clear. You too, dismount." Not nice to meet you, not how was that drive, just instructions. I rolled the window back up and followed him through the gate. The yard was bigger than it expected. Rows of storage containers and equipment cages lit by sodium vapor floods that turned everything the color off old paper. Jasper led me past 2 rows of containers to a standalone cagey in the back corner. It was maybe 10 feet on a side, chain-link walls with a roof of corrugated metal, and inside I could see a single pallet wrapped in heavy black plastic. He stopped and motioned for me to pull up parallel. I did hew to my door, and I opened it. "Step down," he said. I climbed out. The cold bit through my layers immediately. Had to be 15 below, maybe colder, with the... Jasper unlocked the cage and swung the door open. He didn't go inside, just stood there and pointed. "That's your load. Single pallet, secured cabinet, total weight, 840. You'll strap it, center mount in your box. No stacking, no scandry. Cargo." I walked closer. The pallet was standard wood, and sitting on top of it was a metal cabinet about the size of a mini fridge wrapped tight in black plastic sheeting. Frost clung to the underside of the plastic in thin feathery layers like the thing inside was colder than the air around it. "That was weird. It's climate controlled," I asked. "Was it'll equalize once it's out off Traj? You need to get it to Gakona before it warms past threshold." "What's threshold?" "Not your concern. Just don't leave it sitting in a heated space." I looked at him. His expression didn't move. "What's inside?" "Scientific equipment. That's all you need to know." I didn't love that answer, but the load was small. The pallet looked stable, and I'd signed the waiver already. I walked around it once. No liacs, no damage I could see. The plastic was taped down tight with heavy strapping tape. How do I check it if something seems off? You don't. You deliver it, sealed. If the plastic is breached or the straps are cut, you call the number on your contact sheet immediately. Do not open it. That pulled at my gut again. A little hard this time. Why? Jasper reached into his parka and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He handed it to me. "Read this, then signed the baton." I unfolded it. It was a single page printed in narrow black type on ConocoPhillips letterhead. The heading said, "Transport Protocol." Below that were 8 numbered lines. At the bottom was a signature line and a diet field. I read it twice. Most of it was standard confidentiality, the kind of thing you saw in high-value freight or proprietary tech. Autonomous behavior was a weird phrase. Equipment didn't behave. It worked or it didn't. "What kind of anomalies?" I asked. "Unlikely you'll see any. If you do, you'll know." That's not an answer. Jasper's pale blue eyes stayed flat. "Sign it or don't. If you don't, I'll call Linden and they'll send someone else. You'll still get half your fee for the drive up here. Your choice." I stood there in the cold holding the paper. $6,500. Half of it already in my account. The load wasn't hazmat, wasn't oversized, wasn't illegal, as far as I could tell. It was just weird. And weird wasn't thessimus dangerous. Probably. I pulled a pen from my pocket and signed the bottom of the page. Jasper took it back, folded it, and tucked it into his paca. "Good," he said. "Back your truck up. I'll get the forklift." I climbed back into the cab and repositioned the Freightliner, so the rear doors lined up with the cage. Jasper came back a minute later, driving a propane lift. He maneuvered the forks under the pallet, raised it smooth, and loaded it into my trailer without a word. I watched from the side mirror. The pallet slid in clean, centered, just like he'd said. The frost on the plastic glittered under the floodlights. Jasper climbed down from the lift and walked to the back of my trailer. I met him there. He pointed at the tie-down points. 4 straps, minimum. Crossed pattern. Check-a-tone, every 2 hours. Got it. He stepped back. I secured the straps, pulled them tight, checked the tension twice. The load didn't shift. When I was done, I closed the rear doors and locked them. Jasper handed me a small plastic card, the kind you'd use for a hotel key. "Gate pass gets you out of the yard. Leave it in the drop box at the guardhouse." I took it. "Anything else?" "Doc." Safe you act back toward the guardhouse, without waiting for a reply. I stood there for a second, in the cold, looking at the back of my trailer. Then I climbed into the cab, fired up the engine, and rolled toward the exit. I dropped the gate pass in the box and pulled out onto Spine Road. The rules were still folded in my wallet. I could feel them there, a small, stiff rectangle pressing against my thigh. I turned south and started driving. I left Yard 7 around 4:30 with a full tank and 2 large coffees from the guardhouse vending machine, the kind that taste burnt no matter when they were brewed. I dropped the gate pass in the box and pulled south onto Spine Road, watching the facility light shrink in my mirrors. The rules were just overcautious security measures. That's what I told myself. Companies did this kind of thing all the time. When they had proprietary tech or research equipment they didn't want copied or stolen, the confidentiality clause made sense. The no photos thing made sense. Even the bit about anomalous behavior probably just meant if the thing started leaking or smoking or whatever, call someone before it became a hazmat situation. I'd sign stricter NDAs for pharmaceutical runs. That's what I kept thinking as I emerged onto the Dalton and pointed south toward Col. The sky was already going purple at the edge. Sunset came early far north in February. I had maybe another 20 minutes of decent light. Then it had be full dark until morning. I cracked the first coffee, hot enough to burn my tongue. The highway stretched out, clean and empty ahead. No other headlights, no trucks coming north yet. Just me, and about 400 miles of frozen, nothing between here and Fairbanks. I tried to settle into it, the rhythm of the road. That's long haul is mostly finding the groove where your body stops fighting the seat and the engine noise turns into white noise, and the hours start clicking past without you really noticing them. I'd done this route enough times that I knew the landmarks by heart. The pipeline crossings, the creek bridges, the little turnouts where you could pull off if you needed to chain up or check your load. 2 hours down, check theft straps at the next pipeline overhead, maybe stretch my legs. The cargo protocol said every 2 hours, so that's what I'd do. The coffee was helping. I wasn't tired yet, but he wanted to stay ahead of it. I had the heat running steady and the CB on low. Just static and the occasional pop-off interference. Nobody else out here tonight? Apparently. That was fine. I didn't need I passed the first pipeline crossing around 6:15. Didn't stop. The straps would be fine for another hour. And I wanted to put more distance between me and Proto before I pulled over anywhere. Don't know why, just felt better to keep moving. The second crossing came up around 6:45. The pipeline ran overhead in this section. Big silver tube held up by those massive A-frame supports that you've seen perifrost zones. I slowed down a little coming under it. The road curve just past the supports, and there was always a chance of black ice in the shade. That's when I heard it. Tapping, metal on metal, steady, deliberate, coming from the trailer. I eased off the throttle and listened. Tap, 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 3 beats, pause, 3 beats again. It didn't sound like cargo shifting. Cargo shifts when you break order or hit a bump. This was rhythmic, consistent, it kept going, even when the road was straight and smooth. I checked my mirrors, nothing but darkness behind me and the faint glow of my running lights on the pavement. Tap, tap, tap. I told myself it was theckage, metal cage, metal pallet. Temperature dropping outside, things contract in the cold, joints settle. It was probably just the frame adjusting as the temperature equalized. Jasper said it would do that. The cargo had been climate controlled in storage. Now it was sitting in a trailer at 15 below. Of course, it was going to make noise. That made sense. I kept driving. The tapping continued for maybe another 10 minutes. Then it stopped. I didn't realize how tight my shoulders were until they weren't anymore. The CB had been quiet all night, just the low hiss of static and the occasional click when I hit a spot with some atmospheric interference. I wasn't expecting anything else. Most drivers didn't run this stretch at night unless they had a reason, and the ones who did usually kept to themselves. So when it crackled to life around 7:30, I actually flinched. The voice came through clear to clear. No distortion, no breakup. It sounded close. Right behind me. Close. Maddie, the voice said. Maddie, sweetheart, I need you to pull over. My hands locked on the wheel. Nobody had called me that in 20 years. Not since I was a kid. Not since my mother was alive. I'm so cold. Maddie, please pull over just for a minute. It was her voice, same cadence, same soft draw she had when she was trying to coax me into something. The way she used to say my name when I was scared of the dark or didn't want to go to school. I recognized it immediately. My foot started lifting off the throttle. Then I caught myself. I reached for the folder on the passenger seat, flipped it open with one hand. The route sheet was on top, but underneath, it was the page Raven had printed. For me, back at the yard, the one with the bullet points. Do not respond to K by convocation unless you initiate contact and verify the other party. I stared at the line. My hand was shaking. Batty, please. It's so cold. I turned the CB off. The cab went silent, except for the engine and the road noise, and my own breathing, which sounded too loud in my ears. 10 minutes. The protocol said to shut off communication for at least 10 minutes. If anything, anomalous occurred. I kept my eyes on the road, both hands on the wheel. The center line kept drifting, left in my peripheral vision, and I had to correct twice before I realized I was the one drifting, not their road. The rumble strip growled under my right tires. I jerked the wheel left, overcorrected. The truck swayed. I eased it back to center and made Meiselfrethy slower. My mother had been dead for 18 years. Heart attack in a dentist parking lot in Sacramento. I got the call from my aunt while I was working a construction job in Reno. Didn't make it back in time for the service. That voice wasn't her. Couldn't be. It checked the clock on the dash. 7:33. I needed to keep the radio off until 7:43. The road stretched out straight and black ahead of me. My high beams caught the reflectors on the shoulder. Markers sand. Nothing else. No other trucks, no buildings, no lights, except mine. I focused on keeping the truck centered, on watching the white line, on counting the pipeline supports as I passed them. 4 minutes. 5. The shaking in my hands started to ease up. 6 minutes. I thought about pulling over, checking the trailer, looking at whatever was making that tapping sound. Then I thought about the voice and decided I'd rather keep driving. 7 minutes. The rumble strip caught my tyro gain, and I corrected without thinking this time. Muscle memory kicking back in. 9 minutes. At 10, I reached for THECB and turned it back on. Static. Just static. I waited, listened, watched the channel indicator to see if anyone was transmitting. Nothing. The emptiness should have been a relief. I know that. I should have been glad the voice was gone and it was just me. Anthe wrote again, and whatever that was, it was over. But I didn't feel relieved. I felt like something had been testing the door, and I'd only barely remembered to lock it in time. The highway kept stretching ahead. White line, yellow line, reflectors, dark. I had another 350 miles to Coldfoot, then another 252 Fairbanks, then the cutoff to Gacona, and the Larry Putty. The protocol sheet was still open on the passenger seat. The rules didn't feel theoretical anymore. They felt like the only thing between me and whatever was riding in the back of my truck. I pulled into Coldfoot around 9:45. The fuel station was lit up bright enough to hurt after 3 hours of highway darkness, and I parked at the dieselless land farthest from the building. Force of habit. I filled the tanks first, watching the numbers climb, then locked the truck and headed inside. The bathroom was single occupancy with a space heater mounted to the wall. I washed my hands twice, splashed water on my face, stood there for maybe 30 seconds, just letting the warmth soak in. My reflection looked normal, tired, but normal. I figured that was something. The cafe was attached to Theffel Station through a connecting door. I pushed through and got hit with the smell of fryer grease and burnt coffee and the classic rock station somebody had playing over mounted speakers. Fleetwood Mac. There were maybe 6 people scattered across the booths and counter stools, all of them in work gear or winter layers. Nobody looked up when I came in. I grabbed a booth near the back, dropped the protocol folder on the table, and ordered coffee and a burger from a server, who looked about 20 and didn't ask for my name. She brought the coffee in under a minute. It was water yet and too hot, and I drank half of it anyway. The noise helped. The music, anti-low, conversation, and the clatter from the kitchen all kind of blurred together into this wall of sound that made the last 3 hours feel distant, unreal. Maybe I could almost convince myself the tapping had been road vibration and the voice had been some CB prankster with a frequency scanner and a sick sense of humor. People did that kind of thing. Not common, but not impossible. I was halfway through the burger when I noticed the trooper. He was sitting at the counter about 15 feet away, angled so could see most of the room. Alaska State Trooper uniform, duty, belt, winter hat, sat on the stool beside him. He was nursing a cup of coffee and watching me. Not staring, just watching. The kind of look cops give when they're deciding whether something's worth their time. I kept eating. Didn't make eye contact, didn't look away, just kept my pace steady and worked on the fries. He stood up maybe 2 minutes later and walked over. Evening, he said. Evening. Hana did at the empty bench across from me. Mind if I sit? I gestured at I sit. He sat down, set his coffee on the table, folded his hands in front of him. Up close, I could see his nameplate. Parsons. Hazel eyes. Clean-shaven, wind-reddened skin. Maybe mid-30s, long haul. He asked Prudo to Gacona. That's a run. He glanced at the protocol folder, then back at me. You with Lindon contract driver. He nodded slowly. What are you hauling? Scientific equipment. What kind? Bill says environmental. Monitoring cabinet, about 840 pounds. Parsons tilted his head. Mind if I see the paperwork? I didn't love it, but I didn't have a reason to refuse. I slid the folder across the table. He opened it and pulled out the bill of lading, scanned it without touching the other sheets, then set it down and tapped. Thefrit. Description line with one finger. Cabinet, he said. That's what it says. You see what's inside? It was sealed when I picked it up. Where'd you pick it up? Conoco Phillips Yard, outside, dead horse. He looked at me for a beat, then slid the folder back across the table. You running straight through? Planning to. I could drive back to Coldfoot, park at the cafe, wait until morning, call Raven, and tell her I was done. She'd keep the first half of the payment. That was fine. That was fair. I'd be safe. The word sat in my head like a weight. Safe. And that scared me because I felt calm about it. Genuinely calm. The idea of turning around didn't make me anxious or guilty or worried about the money. It just felt right, obvious, smart, which meant it wasn't mine. I don't quit jobs. I've never quit a job. I've worked it through broken ribs, through the flu, through 2 winters and Fairbanks before I had decent gear. I don't just turn around because things get weird. But this felt different. This felt easy. This felt like relief. And that's how I knew. It was planted. The CB radio clicked. I hadn't touched it. Hadn't leaned against the dash. Hadn't hit a bump. It just clicked on. Static filled the cab. Low, steady, white noise. I stared at the radio. The volume knob turned by itself. Slow, deliberate. The static got louder. I reached for the power knob. The static cut out. A voice came through. Maddie, same voice. Same cadence. My hand froze halfway to the knob. Maddie, pull over. I'm cold. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. The Aurora rippled overhead. The tapping continued from the trailer. 3 hits. Pause. 3 hits. The voice waited. The AM/FM radio clicked on. I didn't touch it. I hadn't touched it since I got in the truck at yard 7. The CB was already running static, and that voice kept calling me Maddie. And now the FM decided to join in. It didn't fade in or warm up, just clicked on at full volume. A man's voice came through. Calm, professional, the kind of voice you'd hear on public radio doing weather updates or traffic advisories. Attention, northbound traffic on the Richardson Highway. Road closure in effect at milepost 227 DU to avalanche hazard. All vehicles are advised to take the eastern bypass via Old Valdez Trail. Repeat, road closure at milepost 227. Detour via Old Valdez Trail. I wasn't on the Richardson yet. Still, I had another hour before I hit the junction south of Delta, and I knew Theowy's up here pretty well. After 3 months of running loads, there was no eastern bypass. Old Valdez Trail was a historic route that hadn't been maintained in decades. You couldn't drive it in February. Probably couldn't drive it in July. The voice repeated the message. Same tone, same pacing, word for word. Then it said, my name, Driver Bell. Please acknowledge. My foot eased off the throttle. The voice waited 5 seconds of dead air. Then it came back. Mark Bell. Acknowledge road closure and confirm detour. Route. I reached for the power knob and twisted it off. The radio went silent. My hands were shaking a little. I set them back on the wheel and counted to 10 in my head. Then pulled the protocol folder off the passenger seat with my right hand. While steering, with my left eye, flipped it open. The pages were crumped low from being handled too many times already tonight. I found the line I was looking for. Protocol 6. Do not respond to any radio communication, CB, FM, AM, unless you initiate contact and verify the other party's identity. If unsolicited communication occurs, power off the device for a minimum of 10 minutes before resuming use, 10 minutes. Semarel as the CB. I checked the dashboard clock, 11:53. I turned it back on at 12:03. I set the folder back on the seat and kept driving. The Aurora was still rippling overhead in those wide green bands that pulsed like something breathing. The road stretched out flat and empty under the headlights. No other vehicles, no lights anywhere except the truck in the sky. The tapping started dagging. Same pattern. 3 hits. Pause. 3 hits. Pause. Sharp metal on metal sound coming from the trailer. I'd heard it twice already tonight, and both times I rationalized it or ignored it. This time felt different. I started counting in my head. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The tapping matched me. I stopped counting. The tapping stopped. I waited 5 seconds, then started. Again. 1, 2, 3, 3 taps. Pause. 4, 5, 6. 3 taps. Pause. It was tracking me. Whatever was back there in that black-wrapped cabinet was listening to my thoughts or my breathing or the rhythm of my heartbeat. And it was tapping all like it knew exactly what I was thinking. I stopped counting and gripped the wheel tighter. The tapping continued. Same rhythm. 3 hits. Pause. 3 hits. Pause. Steady and deliberate and wrong. I kept my eyes on the road and didn't let myself think about it. 10 minutes. I just had to drive for 10 minutes, Anthony. I could turn the radio back on and it would be static or nothing or some actual station playing classic rock at midnight. The counting thing was a coincidence. Road vibration, car gasoline, thermal contraction. I had signed a protocol sheet that mentioned anomalous behavior, but that didn't mean the thing could read my mind. I checked the clock. 11 minutes, 56 seconds, and 7 milliseconds minutes left. I hit Paxton around 12:40. The tapping had stopped. Vibe cutting out all at once, like someone flipped a switch. The Aurora was still going, but it had dimmed a little, pulling back from those wide bands into narrower ribbons that flickered instead of pulsed. I hadn't seen another figure on the shoulder since I turned the FM off. No voices on the CB. No new thoughts planted in my head telling me to stop or turn around. Just road and darkness and the hum of the engine. Paxson wasn't much. A lodge that closed for the winter. A couple of buildings I couldn't identify in the dark. And a dot maintenance area on the east side of the highway with a chain link fence and a gravel lot full of plows and graders. The work lights were on. That's what made me pull in. Bright white H halogens, mounted on poles, lighting up the whole lot like a construction site. Real light. Electric light. The kind that didn't pulse or ripple or cast shadows that moved wrong. Slowed and turned into the access road. Gravel crunching under the tires. There were 3 trucks parked near the building. 2 plow rigs with blades angled down and 1 smaller Utsida pickup. All of them looked normal, dirty, and road salted. And real. I pulled the rig tow, a stop near the fence about 50 feet from the building, and put it in park. Left the engine running. The work lights were bright enough I could see the whole lot. The building, the equipment, everything looked solid. Normal, like the world had gone back to making sense. I sat there for 30 seconds, just breathing and letting my shoulders drop. Then, I remembered I was supposed to check the straps every 2 hours, and I hadn't done it since that was over 2 hours ago, probably closer to 3. I grabbed my flashlight from the door pocket, zipped my parka all the way up, and opened the cab door. The cold hit me immediately, 20 below, maybe colder. The kind of cold that goes straight through your lungs and makes your teeth ache. I stepped down onto the gravel and shut the door behind me, then walked around the side of the trailer toward the rear. The work lights lit everything up pretty well, but I turned the flashlight on anyway, clicked it twice to make sure it was working. Beam came out strong and white. I reached the back of the trailer and stopped. The black plastic wrap was bulging. Not a lot, maybe 6, and but it was pressing outward from the center of the pallet, like something inside was pushing hard against the wrap, stretching it tight. The plastic was thick, industrial shipping grade, the kind you use to weatherproof freight, but it was bowed out in a smooth curve that hadn't been there. When Jasper loaded it, at yard 7, I stepped closer and aimed a flashlight. There was a wet line running down the side of the wrap. It started about halfway up the cabinet and ran straight down to the pallet base, maybe an inch wide, glistening under the flashlight beam, but it wasn't wet anymore. It was freezing as I watched it, the moisture turning to ice and ridges that layer over each other like candle wax. I stood there staring at it for a few seconds, trying to figure out what I was looking at. The cabinet was cold when they loaded it. Jasper said it had been Climatech controlled and would equalize, but it was 20 below outside. If it was warming up, it wouldn't be sweating, and if it was sweating, the moisture wouldn't freeze that fast unless it was colder than 20 below. I didn't touch it, didn't get any closer, just stood there with the flashlight on it and the work lights buzzing overhead and the gravel crunching under my boots every time he shifted my weight. The protocol sheet said to report anomalous behavior immediately. This probably counted. But my phone was dead and I didn't know who I'd call anyway. Raven wasn't swearing. Jasper didn't give me a number. The delivery contacted Jacona wouldn't mean anything until I got there.